Welcome to the RevRoom. I'm your host, Rachel Bryant. Join me each episode as we discuss the strategies of top marketing practitioners, uncovering the tactics that transform ideas into revenue. Whether you're a seasoned marketer or an aspiring leader, the RevRoom is your go-to source for actionable advice and industry trends. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and enjoy this episode. All right, everyone. I'm really excited about this episode. Man, have we got a treat for you. Today, we're sitting down with Brian Schmid from Inverta to talk more AI for marketers. You're probably thinking, didn't you talk AI in the last episode? We sure did. But Brian has some great insights fresh from returning from all the buzz at the recent Marketing AI conference, or MAICON for short. And I really wanted to bring you some of what he heard and experienced. So Brian is here to bring the tea on the AI revolution that's turning our industry on its head. We're talking game-changing stuff that's moving fast, and Inverta's got the inside scoop on how to ride this AI wave. No more slapping AI band-aids on your strategy and hoping for the best. We're talking savvy, strategic moves that'll have your team running smoother than a well-oiled machine. So whether you're an AI rookie or you've been in the game for a while, buckle up. We're about to give you the kind of insights that'll make you the smartest cookie in your next strategy meeting. Let's jump in and have some fun. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode. We're really excited to have Brian Schmid, who's on the Inverta team here. Hi, welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad you can be with us. Brian, just shoot it over to you. We want you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll dive right into our content.
Yeah, great. So hi, I am Brian Schmid. I am a senior consultant with Inverta. I've been here almost 3 years. Prior to that, a lot of work in demand gen, campaign planning, marketing ops, some message development. I tend to stick around in one place for a really long time and do a lot of different things there. So I like to get pretty deep expertise in the businesses that I'm in, but like try various hats on while I'm there. So yeah.
That's great. Well, welcome, Brian, to the show. And I'm excited about the content today, talking a little bit about what you brought back from the recent MAICON conference. But before we jump in, a regular discussion we have here on the Rev Room is to share our favorite coffee mugs. So I brought mine, and I think you brought yours too.
I did. It is
Yeah.
different than what I had hinted at that I might use
Oh,
previously,
okay.
though.
I'm
So
excited to
it's a
hear about
surprise.
this. Yeah. Great. Well, I'll share with you mine real quick. And mine, I brought a Yeti today. Everybody loves a good Yeti. Mine specifically has a sticker on it from my son's football team. So it's football season here in Michigan, high school football. So go PC Mustangs and go Caleb. All right. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, so for me, normally during the weeks, like I just drink cold brew and it's just in an iced container. It's not very fun. The one I brought today is the one I use over the weekends. It's hard to see, but it is a color changing mug, so that
Yes.
when you put hot coffee in it, the whole picture changes. I got this when I was on like our local NPR affiliate. A few years back, they were doing a local political podcast that I was on. And so they gave me a car talk mug that changes colors. So yeah, it's fun with hot coffee over the weekend.
That's great. Well, thanks, Brian. I also have a couple color changing ones that I'll probably bring to the show at some point. So thank you for sharing. That's great. And yes, Brian, you are a man of many hats
Thank you.
in different realms. So we're excited for your insights here today. So tell us a little bit about the MAICON conference, a great acronym for the Marketing AI Conference. So
Yep.
MAICON, we would call it. But just tell us a little bit about the conference, what you experienced there, and just some of the initial insights, and then we can dive into some of the specifics.
Yeah, totally. So MAICON, it's in the name. It's the Marketing AI Conference. So you can kind of guess what the topic probably was. It's put on by the Marketing AI Institute, whose job really it is to kind of lift up opportunities for marketing to adopt rather and use AI. There were roughly 1,100 people there in Cleveland last week. So I mean, I know it's grown by several hundred people every year. And it was a really exciting opportunity to get to meet I think a pretty wide array of practitioners, folks who had just gotten started to people who were really deeply entrenched in like the actual creation of large language models, which is not something that I'm going to get into because it's technically way over my head. But a broad diversity, I think, of where they were at in their maturity of AI use. Um, it was, I think, for me, really exciting to see how rapid the advancements were.
Mm.
So if you've been sleeping on the topic a little bit, don't anymore, I guess is my advice. It's not a fad. A really fantastic array of very specific use cases, but also look forward into where it's going. Um, so yeah, I think some specific stuff that I heard on the floor. Um, the need for human involvement is
Mm.
still there. Um, the output from a lot of AI tools, particularly for us in B2B, like historically, we've been really content focused, right? The content output is still lacking in some specificity. Doesn't tell a story. There aren't like fun anecdotes. It doesn't really come to life or feel personal. So I think us as marketers taking the time that we're saving to create content and then using that time to make it go from fine to great is really important. That was a pretty common thread.
Yeah, that's really great. I'll go back to something you said to start, and that was because of the rapid change that we're seeing and just the layering on of AI technologies and the use cases that you can bring. Just going back, we just did episode with Kathy Mackey, who's on our team,
Yep.
just a couple weeks ago on how to get started with AI. And like to your point, if you haven't gotten started yet, you really need to really start thinking about how you're going to do that, probably before year end, and how you're going to incorporate that into your team. So then, as you move into 2025, you've got a good game plan and roadmap for how you're going to do that. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like that sense of urgency and like why, like what's going to happen to teams who haven't started integrating this into their
Yeah.
organization?
No, I think that's really important. You when you think about urgency, for me, it's looking at the trend of where things are headed. You know, why do we need to move so quickly? And what I walked away from that conference with, artificial general intelligence is coming a lot faster than people think.
Mhm.
And so to help define that for people who aren't aware, it's the idea of these models like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Gemini being better than the average employee at most things. I think people think of general intelligence as this like super smart, better than the best human at every possible thing. It doesn't have to get that way to see, I think, huge shifts in how work occurs. Most employees, by definition, are average. That's okay. Nothing
Yep.
wrong with that. Like, not
Mhm.
everybody is motivated by like coming to a job every day. That's okay. Um, it's once we see AI start outperforming average employee at most things that we are going to start to see companies have to take a real hard look at, do I need a staff this size? When a large chunk of what they're doing is getting done by AI. So the urgency comes into play when, if we're looking at AGI coming around in 2030 to 2035, so, you know, 6
Not too far
to
away.
10 years, it's not that far.
Mhm.
Um, it is the marketers, it is the employees that have really adopted and ingrained AI use into their everyday lives, into their work, that are gonna be best positioned, I think, to thrive. Um, don't say it to scare anyone, I just think it's best not to take, like, a head in the sand posture here. Like, be aware, know what's going on, and improve your skill set. It's something we
Yeah.
should all be doing, as we go through our working lives anyway.
Yeah. Well, we won't belabor that point because I think we talked a lot about that. I love your Care Bear glass, by the way. Um, yeah, you should have talked about the Care Bear glass, Brian. That's
It's not
great.
a coffee mug.
Right? Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair enough.
Mm.
Okay. Which Care Bear is it? That's the Sunshine Care Bear or
It's
Happy Care Bear?
Sunshine Bear.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we have these, like, really old, like, those glasses that you get from Pizza Hut,
Yes.
just in our cabinet, and I was like, "What would be the most fun glass I could possibly have?" And, yeah, so,
Okay, you brought it today. Okay, I love it.
yep.
Um, we talked a lot with Kathy last episode, so please go back and listen if you're interested in how to get started. So we won't belabor that. Like, you got to get started, but like, I would love to hear from you. What did you hear at the conference about some really exciting things that you're hearing about that could be really beneficial to people that maybe people weren't thinking about already? And then
Yeah, for sure.
I know maybe there's probably some scary things out there that we might go, ooh, that's a little nerve wracking, right?
A little bit of both.
Hmm.
It was during the conference, and if my wife were on here, she would say the same thing because I was texting her throughout. She's like, "You were all over the place in terms of, like, being excited and being very nervous." It's, and it's true. It was tough sometimes to shift your mind from what does work look like when a bunch of AI agents are doing a lot of my job for me to, oh, hey, there's some really great ways to customize content in emails. Like those are very different topics, even though they're all surrounded by AI. Um, but in terms of, I think, the stuff that's exciting, while we were there, OpenAI released its newest ChatGPT model, like 2 hours before the ending keynote. So it was very exciting to see the whole floor like buzzing, like on their phones, like looking this up. So the newest model can solve actual problems, which is one of the doors that had to be opened to have this concept of AI agents, which is AI tools that go and do things for you, not just regurgitate information. So that's very exciting. The notion of, and I think we're already seeing it with Apple's release of Siri that has ChatGPT kind of ingrained in it, um, of telling it to go do something and then it will go execute it. That is taking some of the automations that we see using Make.com or Zapier and allowing you to control them just using your voice, which is something that we heard a lot of. That just like how the iPhone kind of revolutionized touch as an input, we're anticipating our interaction with Gen AI to be through voice predominantly. So voice becoming the input, I guess, of the future. So that was very interesting to talk through and see. Um, Something else that I think is exciting for marketers in particularly is look for the rise of what's called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Um, what it is it's taking advantage of your interaction with the model, the ability to just talk and chat, but it's focusing on a specific data set. So when most people think of like ChatGPT or Claude, it's looking at the universe of data. Um, a RAG can look at your proprietary information, your data, your content, and augment what it's generating with very specific data points. So it better allows for the inclusion of proprietary data. It more secure, private, and it, I think, helps with that specificity that we were talking about. You're leveraging material that your team has put together. So look for that to be integrated more and more with a lot of the, particularly the content and I think data analysis tools that we're using.
Yeah. How about some of the scary stuff that maybe you heard that you were sort of up and down about?
Yeah. So we talked about this concept of AI agents, the notion that these agents can just go do something for you. Eventually, it can, when we anticipate it to get advanced enough that you can have clusters of these essentially interacting with each other and running entire teams or organizations. There's that very famous Sam Altman quote from last year, where he said that 95% of knowledge work will be done cheaply, instantly, accurately, within a few years' time. You have to ask the question, what do I do as a knowledge worker in marketing when 95% of my job can be executed like?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and I think what's scary is no one's really sure. Like in the short term, yes, learn to use the tools because that's how you'll thrive in this environment. In the long term, I don't know.
Mm,
And I think that's the part that's both a little scary and a little exciting. I think it fundamentally changes what our relationship to work might have to be. Um, what's I think exciting about that is it opens up a lot of potential for us to do things that we could not before. Um, in terms of like our actual skill set, which is exciting to me as someone who likes to try on a lot of different hats, but is sometimes limited in my like knowledge of creative tools, for example, Photoshop, Illustrator. I don't know how to use those, but I know how to ask questions and talk to, a computer. Can it
yeah.
help me do those things?
Yeah. Well, I think, like, what we've talked about a lot is how do you apply AI right now? Like, the big uses cases you're looking at is how do I apply AI to get more efficient, right? And even more efficient and more effective when what I'm doing, and not necessarily replace a person or something I'm, already doing. It's more just augmenting what I'm already, like you said, it needs human input, it needs,
Mhm.
like you said, as that starts to sort of go away and the tools can do a job for you with a very limited input. That is something where the maybe lower skill sets, or that gap between, like you said, the average employee and maybe a high performing employee starts
Yeah.
to really narrow, right?
No, I think totally. I think there, in the short term, is a ton of opportunity for high performers to expand, I think, their capacity by leveraging AI. So these are folks who are really good at what they do and are bound by time constraints. There's only
Mhm.
so many hours in the day. High performers are generally more likely to get burned out anyway because they do throw themselves into their work. So I think there is the potential to spread that expertise without burning out the employee because they can get efficient at automating or augmenting some of the more menial tasks. Longer term, I think it starts to narrow the playing field a little bit between quote unquote average employees and your high performing employees. As you see the experience gap narrow and some skill sets, I think, narrow as well. You're always gonna have a difference between a motivated and an unmotivated employee. I think that is true. Um, but in terms of experience, in terms of skills, that starts to narrow. So I think you start to look for more than you do today, who's a good cultural fit?
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
who shares my values, who shares my company's, like, sense of humor even. So you find your people a little bit. And I like that. I like the notion of, where we'll be less and less limited based off of an experience gap or a skill gap, and we'll be able to work with people who like to be there, in a way that we do. And I think
Mhm.
I like that piece.
That's an interesting takeaway, Brian. I like that insight. That's a different way to look at it, I think, than what others look at it is more scary and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. But like to me, that's a great optimistic view, right?
Yeah, and it can be both. Like, some
Oh,
people
of course.
yeah, some people probably will lose. I don't wanna be again, I'm
No.
trying not to be negative about it, but I do wanna be eyes open about it.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton of great advancements that we're gonna see. Like I said, it's gonna democratize our skill set quite a bit. Um, I would be lying if I said that I didn't think that, yes, some people will probably have their jobs removed, but it's an opportunity, uh, like I said, to enhance your skill set and go work for a company that really values what you bring as a person. Um,
Hmm.
we talked a little bit about what does a high performing employer organization look like? Um, and one of the stats that came out from this conference that really stuck with me is for those managers whose teams had an adoption rate of AI tools of about 90%. So their teams using it, they're seeing efficiency gains of 350%, which is
Wow.
insanely high. Amazon Web Services came out with their, I'll call it a case study, but it's like an internal report of how they reduced their code review from 50 days to like 2 or 3, and it saved $260 million in development work. Those are huge savings, highly valuable to the company. Um, but you have to ask the question, what do you do with all that spare time? And it's one of two things. It's take the time and make something even better, or innovate, or create something new, or you remove potentially some unnecessary positions and you save the staffing costs. Um, I think we're going to see, I think we're going to see businesses tell us a lot about themselves and who they are with which of those paths they choose to go down.
Yeah, and it certainly it's probably a combination of both, right? Like,
Yes,
there's
it will be.
always that. And we've been through so many revolutionary changes,
Totally.
across, every part of our industry over the last, 2, 3 decades. If you've been in it long enough, you've seen that happen. And I think though this one's a little different. Like, I feel like this one, if you aren't educating yourself well on a continual basis around the changes or using the tools and like digging in and actually start, I think you're like, I think you're going to get behind so quickly. It's going to be almost impossible to catch up to a point where your organizations might be in 5, 8 years from now.
Yeah, you do have to move now. I like the point you made about marketing technology. Like it's been for both of our careers. It advances all the time. There's always something new, a new marketing automation platform, a new way to look at intent or account-based marketing.
I mean, even the
We
web and email alone, Brian, when I started in this
Oh, yeah.
business, I was using a fax machine to contact people, right? Like
I
it,
absolutely have done that.
yeah.
Not supposed to, by the way, but, we all did it.
Opted in, opted in.
Yeah, I used, I first got into marketing in direct mail, but not as the way we think of it today, as literal postcards.
Mhm.
Like direct response stuff is what I really got into. But yeah, I've been using MarTech my entire career, and I always get excited about it because it helps me better segment or personalize or analyze, but that's just helping me get better at what I'm already good at. And I think what
Yeah.
I'm excited about with AI is it allows me to do things that I just cannot do today. Um, it gives me access to coding. You can create some of your own apps on some of these tools that just work immediately. Um, I can't create video. I can't create things in Photoshop or in Illustrator. Like it's not a skill set that I have, but I am a storyteller, not just in marketing, but in my real life. Like I play D&D with my friends. That is storytelling at its core. Now I've got the tools to put visuals behind those stories. That's not something I could do before,
Yeah.
and it just makes, I think, my professional life and my personal life just come to life, I guess, in a little bit of a different way, in a way that I couldn't do before. And I think that's cool that those types of expressions are not going to be gate kept behind a pretty highly skilled uh, tech tech tool,
Yeah.
like a video editor or, like I said, Illustrator or Photoshop. And I don't mean to diminish, the work that people have put their lives in, like to doing
Of
this.
course.
But I think that type of expression shouldn't be gatekept behind, skills like that, and that to me is exciting.
Yeah. Um, Brian, you've been teaching some classes, and doing some of those things. I wonder if you have any advice for any, like, I mean, guess any range of marketer, right? Whatever point they are in their career, because you're not really learning about AI and these tools in a business or a marketing class in college right now. Like, I don't think that's actually happening. You're not getting your hands dirty and doing these things. You might be touching it, whatnot. I mean, my kids are both in high school, and like they just unleashed them to be able to use ChatGPT about that much, right?
Yeah.
For education purposes. I wonder if you have any tips for anybody, like, where should people go get education on these things? What are some of the areas or the places that you go to learn about these things? And then, like, How can you sort of improve without just the doing part we've talked about, but like how do you educate yourself ongoing?
That's a great question. I mean, I'll honestly plug the institute that put on this conference. The Marketing AI Institute is chock full of newsletter resources, podcasts that exclusively focus on developments in AI over the last week, over the last month. Just keep in mind, like this moves really, really fast. There are, for example, I think a lot of folks still think about AI art as like, oh, it struggles with ands and there's too many fingers. And you look at some of the photos now that it's come out within the last few weeks, even. Look at Midjourney, which is just kind of the leader in art generation. Um, it's increasingly difficult to
Hmm.
so I think my tip to folks is find a resource like what's put out by the Marketing AI Institute that stays current. Um, it's this can't just be a hobby. It's moving too quickly.
Yeah.
So your perception, if your perception is based on something 6 to 9 months ago, is pretty out of date at this point. So a newsletter, podcast, something that you can just keep up on once a week is a really fantastic place to start. Find the tools that you use in your day to day. For me, ChatGPT is extremely common. Claude I use to write. Perplexity I use to search. And I just keep up to date on their product releases too. Just like you would for Marketo, like you would for Sixth Sense or any of the other demand base, any of the other tools that we use, um, you would stay up to date on their release notes. Like what's new? What can I do? Do the same thing here. Um, what I do think that's great for the individual, right? Organizationally,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a different story. I think when we think about preparing our teams, yes, encouraging your team to become conversant about AI, understand how it works, what's it good for, what's it not good for. Um, we talked a little about integrating it in your daily life, and those are good places to start, right? But as an organization to advance, you have to think a little bit more strategically.
Hmm.
Uh, what are the business or marketing goals that can be met faster or surpassed? And then look at who are the teams best equipped to support those goals. Um, what are these specific use cases? What are those tools that can solve those use cases? And then what is our plan uh, to pilot and to scale? And I think Kathy probably went into that into a lot of detail, but it's true. You've really got two paths, I think, to adoption within your business. You can do what I just described, that very centralized approach of here's our key business goal. This is how marketing supports it. And we're going to identify one highly impactful use case that's going to drive a big
Yeah.
return either in cost savings or in revenue. Um, by doing that, you can take that extra revenue or cost savings and apply it to additional use cases. That's a great approach. Alternatively, you've got a very decentralized way of tackling it where individual teams can look at what's highly valuable and a lot of effort for our team that we could look at identifying some specific use cases and tools to help us pilot, iterate, and scale. I think both are valid approaches. I think it comes down to do you really have a strong like exec backing behind AI or not? And if you do, that centralized approach is probably better. If you need to make the case for your executive first, that decentralized approaches is probably the one to tackle. What I think gets left out from both that I do want to stress for everybody on here is just like any other change management, it's not enough to just have the people who are the innovators and who like get in and do it. You have to have someone who communicates it throughout the organization. So, like, doesn't even have to be
Yeah.
someone who's great at using tools. It has to be a strong communicator, someone who can drive awareness and education of the change throughout the organization. Like, don't leave out that this is still change management at its core, right? You have to have someone who's good at doing that. Find an executive sponsor to add some legitimacy to what you're doing. Like, these are things we know, and I think we forget because it's AI and it's exciting and it's different, but implementing it is still a process, just like any other thing.
Yeah, that's really great advice, Brian. I know one of the things you and I talked about before was something you heard at the conference was this idea of random acts of AI. And it sounds like those sort of two streams that you just laid out would help an organization maybe try to avoid some of that, as well as just like, oh, we're just going to go try these things, right?
Yeah, totally. I had a really great conversation. You said the random acts of AI, and I want to give credit where credit is due. Spoke with Melissa Reeve and Jim Uhl from a group called the Agile Marketing Alliance, and like that was their term that we kind of talked about. So I want to give them credit for that. But it really stuck with me. That people get excited and want to go use AI, but AI is not a strategy. AI is a
Hmm.
tool. And just like with anything else, what are you trying to accomplish? What are the use cases that supported? Then go pick the tool. Additionally, once you've got that tool picked, what do you how are you going to measure success? We talk about efficiency gains. How exactly are you gonna track that? I think anecdotally, folks will say, "Yes, I'm faster." I don't think that's enough. I think you really do have to put some metrics aside to identify what are your efficiency gains or what are your effectiveness gains? One of the 2. How are you gonna track them? And then once you have identified success, how do you scale it? It's one thing to see success within an isolated pilot, but within a whole organization, like, you do have to scale. So if you cannot do that, is it really the right tool for the job?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
a great question. I think we're all guilty of just plugging in AI wherever we happen to want to because it's fun.
Yeah. I think that's a good point about being able to measure those impacts because I mean just like this is anecdotal from me, but like I'm not sure if I'm always more efficient because sometimes I'm not as effective, right? Like sometimes it spits out the AI based stuff and then you still have to go back and adjust it and I'm like maybe I could have just been better starting from scratch. I don't know. And sometimes it definitely is helpful to have something to start from and then you move. So like it can be a give and take about whether
Mhm.
it's more efficient or you're more effective or whatever those things are. All I know is that I don't feel as stressed out about some of the things that are harder for me to go do. You're a great writer. I'm not so much. So like for me to be able to get something to start me is super helpful. To your point, like being able to do things that aren't even in your skill set, can is very helpful. So I think that's a good advice about like being able to measure what that impact
Mhm.
is really important. And then of course being able to think about how do we take something that was successful and scale it. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, okay, tell me about we're getting close to time here, but I would love to hear about one of the really cool things that you saw. Like I know you were on the demo floor and like in the, like looking at
Yeah.
different vendors. Tell me about one of the things you saw that really impacted you and was really cool.
Yeah. I'll talk about one. So I watched a SalesLoft demo. For those who aren't aware, SalesLoft purchased Drift a while ago, year, 6 months, doesn't matter. Purchased Drift. And what I thought was really exciting is, Drift historically for me has been a series of options presented to the user. You give me this answer, I give you this response. Very trigger based. Um, Showcasing what they're doing now is it's purely conversational. It is I can tell you anything. You'll give me a generated response based off of I mentioned the RAG concept earlier. Those responses are based on what Drift knows about your content, about your site, about what you do. That's cool, but that's not new, right? That's still just a chat. What was super exciting to me is, SalesLoft's sales outreach component then would alert sales that this conversation has occurred, would then create an email for sales to get sent out that was informed by the conversation that happened in Drift. So it's letting your sales team not just use like a preset kind of generic outreach sequence, but one that was continuing the conversation that had already. I think as every marketer has struggled, I think, with a disconnect between the marketing conversation and the sales conversation. I think the teams that align really well are at a huge advantage, and this just made that very simple. It just makes it one conversation from the web all the way to the sales outreach, and I thought that was great. I thought that was a really powerful way to take a tool like Drift and pretty seamlessly integrate it into your sales outreach sequences. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We work with a lot of companies who have Sales Loft and Drift together. So I'm sure that's a really great tool that they can be able to use. All right. So
Mhm.
as we wrap up, Brian, pro tip time.
Mm,
What's an actionable takeaway for our listeners that you would give them to get like if they're ready to get on that AI journey in marketing, like what would you tell them to go do? And maybe they're on the journey, but they're kind of stuck or they're just doing random acts. Like, what would you say? Here is a couple things you can go do right now.
yeah, I'll give you 3. Um, Go sign up for that newsletter and go listen to that podcast, on the Marketing AI Institute. Um, Education in this particular field is really important. And just kind of hearing things anecdotally is not enough. So do the research and educate yourself on the tools available. Um, so, get those. Find your people, like, know who you can lean on to be strategic, to communicate change, to innovate, to lead. You need all of those things to really impact change within your organization. So find out who they are and just surround yourself with them. Even if you're not wherever you are in your career, maybe you don't have the political clout right now to create an AI steering committee. Like, at least identify who those folks are and start having the conversations with them. If you are at that point in your career, formalize it. Like, build that team with the right people. And then I think the final thing is, like, remember, AI isn't a strategy; it's a tool for accomplishing a goal. Identify what that goal is. Like, find a big rock that you can make some really impactful change with, because that will get people's attention, and it will give you, I think, the legitimacy and the motivation to go tackle additional use cases. So educate yourself, like, surround yourself with people who get it and who are motivated, and then really find that compelling use case or goal. Do those 3 things, and I think you'll be in really good shape.
That's great. Great advice, Brian. Thank you. And thank you for one, going to MAICON and bringing back all these wonderful
Yeah.
insights, not just for us at Inverta, but also for our listeners and our customers and just marketing professionals in general. And thank you for being on the podcast. Hopefully you'll come back and join us again for a similar topic or another topic or something fun. So it was really great to have you on today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to have the opportunity. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for tuning in to the Rev Room today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, Inverta. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.